So basically, our story today is almost a continuation of a story we did. I don't really remember when it was. It might have been a month. It might have been longer than that. I'm old and I get time confused. But we looked at a story a while back about the sending of the 70 or of the 72, depending on what version you prefer. And so today I wanted to look at the same sending, but the sending of the 12. So Jesus has called the disciples. They're not, they haven't been together for a super long time. And yet he is going to entrust them with a tremendous mission. And so that kind of leads us to our story. So Jesus sent out the 12 men with the following order. Don't go to the Gentiles or to the towns of the Samaritans, but go to the children of the lost house of Israel and preach this message. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out demons. Now, I've given this to you freely, so you give it out freely. Don't take any money, silver or gold or copper. A worker is, and don't carry a bag for your clothes or extra clothes or sandals or a walking stick. A worker is worthy of his food. When you go into a town, find one place and stay there. Seek out a person of peace and say, peace be upon you. And if they receive your peace, let it rest on them. If they don't, take your peace back and leave. Now, if you go into a town or village and they don't receive or listen to you, then leave and shake the dust off your feet. I tell you, in the day of judgment, it's going to be better for Sodom and Gomorrah than it is for the people in that town. And that's our story from God's word. So I'm going to get you guys now to kind of help me retell that story. So now Jesus sent out who? Do you remember?
12.
The 12 disciples.
He sent out the 12 with the following order. Don't go to who? Two different groups.
Gentiles and Samaritans.
Gentiles.
Yeah, to the Gentiles or to the towns of the Samaritans, but rather go to, and he uses an unusual title,
The lost house of the Israel.
the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Yeah, and I might have misspoken that, so that might have been on me. And when you go, preach this message. You remember what it was?
The kingdom is near.
Yeah, the kingdom of heaven is at hand, or the kingdom of heaven is near. And then he told them to do four things.
Heal the sick, cleanse the leper, raise the dead, and cast out demon.
Wow, very good. You got every one of them. That's excellent. Yeah. And he said, I've given this to you
Freely.
Yeah, freely. So
You give up freely.
yeah, you give out freely. Don't take
Money,
Silver.
clothes, money.
Yeah, don't take money. It starts off with money, and you're right, Don Wee. We're going to get there in just a second. But he said, don't take money, and he names
Silver, gold,
Silver,
and
gold,
copper.
yeah, silver, gold, and copper, which I find is unusual. To my knowledge, it's the only place that copper is mentioned. Silver, gold, or copper, and don't carry a what, Don Wee?
Bag of clothes.
Yeah, don't
luggage,
carry a bag or extra clothes or
Walking stick.
walking stick, or sandals.
sandals. Yeah,
Sandals.
very good. Why not? Because
Workers worthy of His pay.
A worker is worthy of his food in
His
this story.
food.
The story we did earlier, it was pay. But in this story, it's a worker is worthy of his food. And when you enter a town, what are you supposed to do?
Find a peaceful household to stay.
You're supposed to stay in one place until you leave. Yeah. So find a household and say,
Peace
Peace be with you.
be with you.
yeah, peace be with you, peace be upon you. And if there's a person of peace there, then what's going to happen?
Stay with them.
Stay with them the whole time.
Yeah, and let your peace rest upon them,
Oh,
right?
let you peace.
But if they don't receive you, what are you supposed to do?
Take back
Check
your
out.
peace.
Yeah, take back your, isn't that weird? Take back your peace
Yeah.
and leave. And if you go into a town and they don't, two things,
Accept
They don't
you.
listen or hear or something.
if they don't accept you or hear
Hear you.
you, what are you supposed to do?
Shake off the dust on
Shake
your
off the
feet,
dust
on your
on
sandal.
the sandals.
And leave. And he said, I'm going to tell you in the what?
In the day of judgment,
Yeah.
It's
It'll
better
be better for who?
Sodom, better for Sodom and
Gomorrah.
Gomorrah.
Than it is for the people.
will reject you.
Reject you.
Yeah. The people in those towns. Right. Yeah. Very good. Now, it's interesting to me because this is, there's so many similarities to what we talked about earlier, right? But just enough differences that I wanted to do this story earlier, but I didn't want to do it too early because I knew it would confuse us, right? And as you do stories, that is the kind of thing to think about, because if you have stories that are similar to one another, it is really, really easy to get them confused. And so if I was in an in-person setting here, I would probably have an accuracy checker, just because if I know I'm doing a story that is easy to get something confused, that I want to take that extra step, right, to be sure that people are getting it right. So let's look at the first part of this story. So Jesus sent out these 12 men with the following order: don't go to the Gentiles or to the towns of the Samaritans, but rather go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel and preach this message. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out demons. Now, freely you've been given, so freely give. Don't carry money with you, silver or gold or copper. Don't carry a bag for your clothes or extra clothes or sandals or a walking stick, because a worker is worthy of his food. So we'll stop right there. So what do you think it might have been like for these disciples to be, relatively early in the ministry, to be told that they're going to be sent out away from Jesus and be on their own? And what do you think that might have been like for them?
Fearful.
Fearful. Yeah.
Excited.
Mhm.
Okay. In what way? What do you see there?
Well, I think there's the ones who are signed up for a big adventure,
Okay.
and I find them annoying
Yeah.
because I'm in the, what are you talking about, comfort zone? That doesn't even have a zip code. So I think just the ones who are like, yeah, I'm all for it. They
Okay.
see it all happening. As soon as Jesus says, y'all gonna do this stuff, they're like, well, okay. And
Right.
then the others are going, how on earth are those things gonna happen with me and one of these other people?
Yeah. What? No traveler's checks? Yeah. All right. So fearful, excited. What else?
Apprehensive,
Mm,
because they're, how was it he put it? You're going to the lost sheep. How are they going to respond to what we've got to tell them?
mm,
Uh,
yeah.
Maybe I'm saying calling them sheep, might have put them at ease a wee bit, but sheep tend to be stupid things. So
Yeah.
uh,
Boy, they do. Yeah, they do. And I like that word apprehensive because I mean I think I would have been fine until I heard the uh, heal the sick, cleanse the lepers. Wait a minute, I got to get close to lepers, and then raise the dead. We see that in words, and we're like, wait, what? I was what? I was what? And then cast out demons. Okay, deal breaker. I mean, yeah, we're in. Peter, we got a job for you, buddy. Uh, kind of scenario there. So, but well, let's look at the first part of this story here. So, in this story, we see that Jesus is a bigot. That he doesn't like anybody that's not a Jew, because he said, just go to the lost sheep of the house. Don't go to Gentiles and don't go to Samaritans. So he's a racist.
No,
That's the priority issue thing, I think.
He's a realist. These guys are, barely ready to go to their own people.
Mm.
I think if you're right that these guys are maybe teenagers, so maybe they'll look cute to their own people, but like, oh, look at that one. Doesn't he have pretty hair?
they speak the same language as their people. They live in the same culture. They're going to get on better with them, and they've got to start somewhere. So he's just giving them off what they can chew, and send them out with them. More will come later, but right now, start small.
Mhm.
So do you see Jesus recognizing there's a problem with the people he's sending them to, or that there's more of a problem internally with the people he's sending? As far as the Gentiles and Samaritans, what might have been some issues for the disciples if they'd gone among Gentiles and Samaritans at this point in their ministry?
Well, I think this kingdom language is confusing.
Okay.
So the Jews are expecting a kingdom. That might sound kind of imperialistic and weird. Like, you're already oppressed by another group, right?
Yeah.
And now you're trying to recruit us.
Coming. Yeah, and for Romans to hear that, like, what do you know? What is this new group? What is this new kingdom that's coming in? Right. So
It's what's the question again? Just it slipped from my mind.
well, just as so we're digging into a little bit of especially the culture that's going on here in the States right now.
Yeah.
That Jesus specifically said, don't go to certain people and do go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel.
It makes me think of my setting. My own culture would think perhaps similar to the Jews back then, that God's on our side.
Yeah.
And in my experience can be more lost. So I can understand why Jesus is going to go to them first. They need to sort their mess out first before we can go to anyone else.
Well, for somebody and Vivian, and Dongwei, I'm not sure if you've been part of this conversation, we had done a story earlier in the year about the disciples and how old they may have been. Were you all part of that story?
No.
Okay, so I need to. Uh, there are some indications in Scripture, and I'm not going to form a denomination based on this. All right, but typically, most people, when they see the disciples in their heads, they're in their 30s or 40s, right? Which a disciple, a disciple of a rabbi never would have been that old. A rabbi started being a rabbi basically at the age of 30. He always would choose disciples younger than him. There is a story in, I think it's both in Matthew and Mark, where Jesus and the disciples have been out. They come back into Jerusalem, and one of the leaders of the temple asked Peter and says, "Didn't your master pay the temple tax?" The temple tax is required yearly for everybody 20 years old and above, and it's a half a shekel. And so Peter comes into Jesus and goes, and Jesus goes, "Hey, I need you to do something for me. I need you to go fishing." Peter goes, "Well, don't we pay the temple tax?" He goes, "Well, who's supposed to pay the tax? The son of the king or the servants? But so that so that we don't offend anybody, I want you to go fishing." And he goes and he catches a fish with a shekel coin in his mouth. And he goes and he pays the temple tax for himself and for Jesus.
Mhm.
But the rest of the disciples were there,
Mhm.
which or were probably there. I'm not going to say yes, they were there. But a strong indication is that the disciples may, with the exception of Peter, all been 20 years old and younger, which would have made sense when it comes to the rabbi-disciple relationship. And then if you think of all the arguing and bickering that the disciples did on the road about who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom, if you read the Gospels with that picture in mind, it makes a little bit more sense.
Mhm.
So
Never thought about that.
yeah, and so here in this story, and I thank you, Diane. I should have brought that's helping me to remember this for the introduction, because I mean here Jesus is sending them out. Would they have had them if they were that age? Would they have had the maturity to be able to handle somebody they already had massive prejudices against? Would that have caused them additional difficulties?
He's saying the things they're going to be dealing with would indicate some serious sin issues in their own people. And neither the other guys were just as bad or worse, or he's wanting to really shake them up with their own people first.
Yeah, and that's a great. I mean, do you see that Jesus has kind of a priority list of how he's going to? And it's not that he's not going to reach out to the Samaritans and the Gentiles, which we see later in the Gospels, right? But do you see him having a kind of a priority in mind based on what he does?
Well, I think I also see, like if somebody came from another place with this religious message, I'd want to know how well it had been received in the place the person came from.
Okay.
And so that to me would seem to give it more legitimacy. Right. If you can't convince your own people, why are you coming to me?
Wow. Yeah.
Particularly in a culture that's so centered around the group.
Yeah.
Right. The one who's excluded from a group, from their own group, is highly suspicious. The one who's accepted by their own group, but for some reason travels or goes somewhere else, it is a little more trustworthy. But like if your people don't trust you,
Well, what do we learn about, about the timing of what's going on by the message Jesus tells them to preach? The kingdom of heaven. And now I made I looked at several different versions. Some of them say the kingdom of heaven is near, but another version said the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Do you all see a difference between being near and being at hand?
At hand, it seems even already had it, but near is still a little bit away.
Yeah, that was kind of my take as I was preparing the story. And so as the storyteller, and I'm going into a little bit more detail than you guys than I would with, just a group I was telling a story to. All right. So I would not normally do this in a normal story time. But as the storyteller, I really felt like the kingdom is at hand. It's there. And so I realize it's a small difference, but to me, near and at hand, it was enough of a difference that I wanted to stay with at hand because Jesus is there. I mean, this is happening, guys. It's not this is going to happen. This is happening right in front of your eyes. So, what do we learn about Jesus' expectation or about Jesus' thoughts of what was going on with his ministry by this message he gives them? This, 5 or 6 word message: the kingdom of heaven is at hand. 7 word message. What do we learn about Jesus and his understanding of what's going on?
Well,
He's
I go back to, it's not answering your question, but I go back to your question of what do you think the disciples thought? And I said, well, at hand is very exciting.
Okay.
It's like there's an urgency to it.
Okay.
Let's do this thing. Is maybe what Jesus is conveying to them.
Sam?
Yeah, and that urgency, he can't physically go do this all by himself. He needs to start delegating.
Okay.
Uh, and at some point, these guys are going to be starting to do it. So
Oh, wow.
time
Yeah.
is now.
Yeah. I like that. He's starting to hand off things.
Mm.
Uh, that's a pretty simple message, though. But what do you think it might have been like to be one of those, to be one of the lost sheep of House of Israel and have these 2 guys standing in your town square going, "Kingdom of Heaven is at hand."
Well, I was thinking of, if you go to a prayer meeting where there's um, like the traveling teacher who's known to have a healing ministry, right? And he preaches on healing, and there's all these sick people that come, and then afterwards there's a team of people that can pray for you, and then there's the main speaker, and there's this big long line for the main speaker, and then other people going up to those other folks. I think by having these guys go out and do these things, that's going to integrate them more when Jesus goes in and he's doing big things. I mean, you're going to notice there's something qualitatively and quantitatively different about Jesus, but these guys aren't going to be so much on the fringes, right? Because they're already kind of known in these towns. It's going to allow them to be more hands-on when they come back to those towns again.
Well, let me ask you a question. The next part of the story: heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead. Right? We read that, and it is like, Okay, and then cast out demons. So this message, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. If they do those four things at every place they preach that message, how would that impact the message?
It just, if you heard someone shouting that in your town square, kingdom of heaven's at hand, you might think he's a nutter. But if he's raising people from the dead, healing the sick, you'll be like, okay, I need to listen to this guy. He may only be a kid, but there's something going on here.
Now,
And then when he says, when they say, and my teacher's coming, you're like, wow, this is just a disciple. This is just
yeah.
a kid. Wow, when the real guy shows up, that's going to be impressive. I'm going to be there for that. If this is just the front guy.
Yeah.
Dongui, I'm curious in China, because when I go to a lot of other places, seeing demonic activity in people's lives is not unusual, right? A lot of the places I go. So I mean, I've got friends that will just pull the car over to the side of the road, go up to somebody, lay hands on them, cast out demons out of them, get back in the car and drive on. It's just, they call that Tuesday. It's just another day of the week, right? It's nothing spectacular. Here in the States, we don't see Satan working as obviously, just out and about the way he does in a lot of other. It's not that he's not working; he's just not as obvious about it. In China, do you see more the manifestations of spiritual things than you've seen while you've been here in the States?
Oh,
And I was thinking of probably very
yeah, I heard about some stories, but I've never seen that
okay.
myself.
All right. Yeah, and I'm thinking more than likely it would probably be in some of the more rural areas where you had a little bit more
Yeah,
animal. Some of those
right,
things were.
right.
I mean, typically for me, when I've been in more animistic type settings, and so I did not think that would be the case, because it's even being in the East, in some ways, China is pretty much as Western as the United States as far as all the things that are available. So
It just thinking out loud, in Ireland, some of us is similar to that, but also you go out at night in areas where there's lots of overindulging alcohol and stuff like that. You start to see some of those things too.
yeah, and that yeah, Diane?
A pastor friend who's from a part of Asia said that he encountered it back home, but he's encountered more in the States.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay.
But and yet I've been around this person often and never seen any, so it's kind of like maybe here it's happening, but it's not like walking down the street, right? You're not going to see it when you're driving the car. And part of that is that just so many things in the States, you drive around and you think, does anybody live here?
Yeah.
Right? Because you don't see humans.
Yeah.
Like you see cars, they must use those to go places. You see toys maybe in the yard, but like, do people live in North America? Sometimes I'm not sure. So
Right.
I think it's kind of goes along with that, in that there's not so much happens out in public here.
Yeah.
It's a very private society.
Well, so you're one of these young disciples, and you're told, okay, preach this. I'm going, wow, a 7-word message. I can handle that. That's not difficult. But heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out demons. So what might the impact of those instructions have been on the disciples?
Well, that's my point of terror. And that's when I'm like, is there going to be an extra module on this?
Yeah.
Before we go.
Is there a seminar coming?
Yeah. Though I assume that the kingdom of God is at hand is shorthand, like a song title. You know,
Yeah.
he's been teaching them, and it's definitely, they're not just going to say that and then twiddle their thumbs. More people walk up and they say it again, I'm sure.
There might be something in young people that are really fired up for the Lord, and they sometimes have a confidence and will step out where your eye hearing that will be like, it's gonna get messy.
Yeah.
They'll just step on in, and they might be thinking, oh, it's going to get messy, this will be fun, or they might not even be thinking at all. They'll just told me to do it, I'm going to go and do it.
Yeah. It's just obey.
Yeah.
Well, the next little phrase there, you've been given this freely, so freely give to others. Does that tell us anything? I mean, does it seem like Jesus has prepared them a little bit more than what we have covered here?
Yes.
Yeah. He seems to be saying they're prepared for it.
Yeah, and then the fact that he, and this kind of this is similar to the previous story we've done in this regard, that you're not supposed to take any money, and then any specific silver, gold, and copper, and I mean the way my brain works, just the internal rebel, going, okay, you defined it silver, gold, and copper, so I can take my credit cards with me, okay.
Plastic is okay.
Yeah, I'm golden as long as I got my platinum card. I'm good to go. But he said, don't take any money, and then don't take extra stuff. A bag for your clothes, or extra clothes, or the sandals, or the walking stick. And then he gives a reason for that. Because the worker
is worthy of the food.
Is worthy of his food, which is just a weird, when you that really messed me up in this story, because I was comparing it to the other story we had done. And I'm like, wait, that's not, in the other story, it's wages, right? So here, but so the fact that Jesus is just saying you're going to get what you need to exist. I mean, does that tell us anything about Jesus' expectations for his disciples?
To be the minimalist.
Okay, be a minimalist, yeah.
Yeah.
I think if they are young, that's like reasonable. Like how much, how much support really should we be handing over for teenage preachers? It's like that's a fair wage, right? He's not supporting anybody. He's just himself. And it kind of frees up them to stay with anyone.
Yeah.
Right now, it doesn't have to be like, oh, I have to find somebody that's got more means, right? If they've got an extra bowl, extra bread, I'm good.
Well, I have a question. They're fishermen. That means they have a job, or they're not supposed to be teenagers. I don't know about teenagers. Are they supposed to fish?
Four of them were fishermen.
Yeah, that means they're kind of an out.
How old do they start working?
It's the family business. So in the family business, a teenager would have been working towards doing a full man's work, I think.
Okay.
as soon as they were
Almost
old enough. I mean, by the time they're 13 or 14, and they had hired men. It's not unusual in a family business to even have hired men that might be older than the sons.
Yeah, that is something new to me that they're teenagers, most of them.
Well, in Jewish society, when a boy turns 12, he's considered an adult male.
Okay.
And would not have been unusual for a boy of 15 or 16 to be married.
Okay.
But
So,
they don't need to pay taxes until 20.
until 20, right? The temple tax,
Uh-huh.
temple tax.
Oh,
And that's clearly taught, well, a number of places in the Old Testament where that's established.
So if they are teenagers, they are not the teenagers nowadays. They are not minors.
No.
Yeah.
It would be, well, the word teenagers didn't come into existence until the 1950s.
Yeah.
So that whole cultural adaptation that began in the West.
Maybe, yeah, the young adults.
Yeah,
Very
and
much so.
in American history, if you look just in the colonial periods, in the 17 and up through the mid 1800s, teenagers would go off for months. Teenage boys might go off for months on a hunting expedition. They might have some aspect of the family farm that they ran themselves, or go somewhere. So teenagers had similar sorts of levels of independence until pretty recently.
Well, I mean, even in my lifetime, my wife and I talk about this all the time. When I was 8 and 9 years old, I would get on my bike and ride 15 or 20 miles away from home and not come back until long after dark.
Wow.
And nobody knew where I was.
where were you?
No cell phone.
Well, and the truth of the matter is, me and a friend of mine would go to a creek and catch water moccasins and
Oh.
sell them to the university for $2 each. So, but I mean, we just go exploring, but it was nothing. Today, a parent will be arrested for allowing their kids to do that.
Yeah.
There's actually, last night I read about some states that are actually enacting childhood independence laws that protect parents that want to let their kids, go 4 blocks without parental supervision, because adults are calling the police and saying there are unescorted children. Like this one kid was just down. That's a diversion, but that's how small it's gotten. It's a very different
way of thinking.
Yeah, and people would have seen them as not being abused.
Not taking money, not taking extra clothes, those things. So do we get any idea of Jesus's reasoning for doing these things? For telling them these things. I mean, what do you see there?
He's building their faith up.
Uh,
He's telling them what you're going to do. He's telling them you don't need to bring anything with you to do it. You'll be looked after.
But Jesus never specified how long this sending is gonna be. It could be a week, could be 2 days.
Yeah.
I think it is short term, because if you're going to have an advance, they're going to advance to prepare the way for Jesus. You don't want a very long time to where people forget, like, oh, didn't those guys come? I don't know. Is it back in the spring? I mean, you want it to be pretty close together.
Well, but let me ask you a question. Now, you make me think here. So if these guys had come 7 or 8 months before, but they had healed the sick, cleansed the lepers, raised the dead, and cast out demons. I mean, do you think that would be memorable? Even if they were gone for a while?
I might have forgotten the message. I wouldn't forget that.
Yeah.
But I might have had a little message erosion. or that might have made the message stick.
Yeah. Yeah, Sam?
Yeah, just thinking in a culture like that, they'll have remembered every single thing about them,
Mhm.
even if they weren't, doing anything mad. What they were to preach was a short, clear message. They'll have remembered that.
Yeah.
They'll have really remembered it if they're raising the dead and casting out demons. It's kind of like one they'll tell their grandchildren or great grandchildren.
Well, now I'm getting outside our methodology here a little bit, but it's just because we're not going to get all the way through the story, which is fine. What do you think the result might have been on the disciples if they'd gone out and they had healed the sick and cleansed the lepers and cast out demons and risen the dead, and they had lived by faith and God had provided for them? I mean, what could have been the impact on their lives, if they saw those things happen?
Trust God more, or
Okay.
Mhm.
it reminds me of when we're doing Daniel's story, how interpreting the two dreams, it's helping him to build up his trust.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it would whet your appetite for more.
Mm.
Right, this is a taste, but this feels like at hand. But what's the whole thing going to be like? I want to hurry back to Jesus and find out what's next.
Yeah. More. I like that. Yeah.
I think I also want to go home
Yeah.
and
Change.
tell the people at home too.
Oh,
Going out to all these other places. I mean, don't you want to tell your mama? You know you do.
I thought it was they're gonna go home and change clothes.
Yeah. Because I can't take spare, but and it's funny because in our culture we see that and we're like, ooh, if I wear the same jeans for 3 days, I'm just like, I don't know, I can't do that. But in many cultures still to this day, if you got one outfit, that's you're good. So yeah, that I think very much our culture comes into play when we're when we're dealing with that. So in this story, we talked about the fact that Jesus was giving them a difficult, in the flesh, an impossible task. But we talked about what that might be like for them. And today, does the Lord still send his disciples out on difficult, borderline impossible kind of missions? Does that still happen?
Yeah. Missionaries.
Right, missionaries. And what else might that look like?
I mean, I think it's not just in Christian work. I think God can call people to start businesses, to adopt children. Think of Andrew's family, his parents who felt this call to adopt 15 kids or
17.
Yeah, more.
Wow.
yeah. So there's just lots of ways that it's not just in evangelizing.
Okay, all right, yeah. Sam?
And just thinking he's calling them to their own people or sending them to their own people. And there's often a idea that God sends people to others, but why would he need to send them to our people? We're God's people. But yet he's still doing it,
Yeah, yeah.
thankfully.
I think prophetic words is really difficult if someone feels they're supposed to go out and speak out against or speak to people in power.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, I think I have a message for the president or the heads of companies, or it takes a lot of courage to go up and as well to individual powerful people.
You have to be willing to pay a price. I remember finding out my father had been faced with that. They had a young man from the other community in Ireland working for them, and they had someone threaten him when neighbours found out about it. It could have meant my dad losing his livelihood or his home. But you know, was a Christian, and he knew the right thing to do, and he did it, whatever the cost was.
Wow.
George Washington locked up one of my ancestors or relatives of one of my ancestors for who was a Quaker and didn't want to join the armies of either side. And after a few days, when that power struggle wasn't going in Washington's favor, he decided it would look, Washington decided it would look better for him to just let the guy go. But he was willing to be imprisoned for his, his belief that this arms should not be taken up.
Yeah, I met a pastor from South Africa who's pastoring in Ireland, and it just the last time I saw him, it dawned on me, hang on, you're white, you're a bit older than me, you would have had to do your military service. And I asked him about it, and he just laughed. He says, yeah. And thankfully, when I wrote my letter saying I wouldn't carry a gun against my countrymen, so many were doing it that they didn't put me in jail. But he said seminary was interesting for me. They would send us white guys to the townships on placements, and we knew a Sunday night coming home from the church we'd been ministering in, we'd be arrested on the way home for being in the black or neighborhood. And I said we knew we'd be in jail every Sunday night, being interrogated and being told don't do it again. And we knew the next Sunday night we'd be right back here again.
Wow.
Wow.
Wow. Well, guys, thank you. This story is in Matthew chapter 10, verses 5 through 15. And we just got through part of it, so we'll see about next week. We'll see how that goes. But I'm going to stop the recording now.